pointed to the Hark Mother. And what was this about Jaraval seeing Hoplite's blood? That can only mean one thing. Be you man or some other creature, you are from another realm of existence. She then leaned forward, eyes intent. Tell me, Hoplite, were you the star that fell in our forest? Hoplite shook his head. Impossible. Different dimensions do not exist, and that was not a star. It was my escape shuttle. It is the only possible explanation for your strange appearance, the odd ship in the sky, and the fact that you do not bear the blood of Zod. The Hark Mother told him all the races on Oculus, at the beginning of its creation, were formed from the infinite blood of Zod, the pillar god of might. We have seen your ilk before on this world, though none have appeared in this current age, at least none that we know of anyhow. This star or shuttle, as you claim, is clearly otherworldly in origin as well. This too points to your true nature. The Hark Mother then took a deep breath, giving a long sigh before continuing. I suppose your arrival is a good omen. Outworlders have a long history of benefiting our world when they visit. What history remains of them, anyhow? It surely is a sign from the pillar gods that we are headed into a golden age. A backwoods mythology that had no place in Turnan society. These people would unfortunately have to be re-indoctrinated at another time. Hoplite would not be the one to conduct the process. He had neither the training or the means at his disposal to conduct re-indoctrination, nor the will to do it to someone else, not after it had happened to him. Personnel more suited to the task would have to take care of it later. Now, this talk of Outworlders could only mean that they indeed did have contact with Turnan personnel at one point, though based on the Hark Mother's talk of none in this age implied that it had been a long while since then. He cocked his head toward Jaraval as he asked his own question, taking care to word it in a way that would avoid mention of Chimera. How does he know about my lineage? Hoplite asked. His eyes allow him to see the twisting ladders of the blood. The Hark Mother replied immediately, and without a drop of sarcasm. Hoplite stared. The twisting ladders of the blood. Surely she must mean DNA, but why would she say it like that? More importantly, how could Jaraval see Hoplite's DNA? There was no bionic capable of that. Was he lying about having this alleged ability to avoid mention of Chimera? No. The Hark Mother hadn't hesitated before telling Hoplite about it, meaning that this was already established intel between these elves. Hoplite was still certain that this colony had been lost far before Chimera had begun, but was that really the case? After all, these elves still spoke in fluent Gynesian, meaning that it was likely that not too much time had passed since this colony had been lost. Yet the lack of knowledge about the final kind conflicted with this theory, as did the apparent lack of bionics. If Jaraval really had no way of knowing about Chimera, then how was it possible that the elf could see Hoplite's DNA? The way a Hark Mother had spoken of it implied that only Jaraval alone was capable of doing this. A question then burned within Hoplite. Why could Jaraval do this? How did he do it? Hoplite needed to know. How can he see my blood? Hoplite asked, cocking his helmet back toward the Hark Mother. His Daka, or to put it in more human terms, his eye magic allows him to do so. The Hark Mother replied, again with no sarcasm. Hoplite shook his head. He would not be drawn into such fancies as eye magic. Unfortunately, at this point in time, Hoplite had no idea how to disprove such a claim. Unless these colonists had developed new tech while outside of Turnan's influence. Perhaps, but maybe figuring out that tech should be left to one of the scientists that had been aboard the Sparrow. They would be more capable than Hoplite at deciphering new technology. Now then, if this mutated branch had specific rules against humans entering this place, then that must mean that the standard branch of humans still existed somewhere on this planet. Primitive or not, Hoplite desired to make contact with them at some point. Hopefully soon, depending on what happened here today. Where is the nearest human settlement? Hoplite asked the Hark Mother. If you mean to find the largest gathering of humans possible, then you seek Akandar, the Hark Mother said in a borderline withering tone. It lies far to the west of our forest, all the way to the coast of Feanor, the continent you currently stand upon. There is one other, smaller settlement to the east of here, as well as smaller townships along the way to Akandar. Yet one such as you would seek Akandar, as that would be where the most important humans on Feanor reside. I do assume that you would like to speak to humans with authority. You will find them there. She finished in a confident tone. Yes, Hoplite replied. Do they have transportation ballistics? How far had these humans regressed? Did they still have vehicles and guns, or had they gone back to spears and horses? Yes, they do have ballistas and horses, some of the finest on Arculus, in fact, though few would be able to carry you, I think. The Hark Mother replied, I do mean no offense, sir, but you look quite heavy. That practically confirmed the latter. Still, though, perhaps they weren't as backward as these mutants. Maybe they even still knew of Turna, or maybe forces from the Sparrow could be heading there. He almost hung his head, but kept it upright. The crew would be more likely to have landed in the east, based on the planet's rotation during the evacuation, not the west. Currently, the main objective should be to reunite with the Sparrow's crew, not re-establish contact with lost colonists. That would be taken care of by those better able to talk sense into the locals. How was it that I was teleported here? Hoplite asked. Teleportation had been declared to be physically impossible by top second-arm scientists. They still had tried, of course, but no matter what they did, the second arm had never been able to accomplish it. Even the final kind with their superior tech were still completely incapable of teleportation. Yet, the impossible had happened to Hoplite today, and he would know how. The Hark crystal above, the Hark Mother said, sparing a glance for the glowing amber crystal suspended overhead, the pillar god Draui, formed it for us elves out of the golden flame of foundation. The power of our god draws those with the intent to seek the Harkor here. Hoplite remained silent. Clearly this crystal was really an unidentified element. Somehow, it was capable of teleporting matter, and would have to be confiscated. But how would he go about doing that? There were no visible exits to this room, and he could think of no safe way to procure the crystal without accidentally damaging it. But teleportation, it could shift the tide of the war, a war that Turna had already lost. Again he stuffed that invasive thought far into the recesses of his mind. As long as Hoplite was alive, the war was not over. As long as any Turnan fought, the war was not over. Humanity would not lose. He glanced up at the crystal again, not tilting his helmet. There really was no way for him to take it now, though. No exits. No safe means of retrieving it. No, it would simply have to remain here for now. There would be personnel better suited to retrieving it at another time. Hoplite realized he had been having repeating thought processes during this whole meeting. It would be taken care of later, It will remain here for now. It would be handled by personnel with more experience in this. An unsettling thought occurred to him then. What if he was the only personnel left? What if the Sparrow's crew all died on landing? Either from a violent crash landing or from the final kind. He took a deep breath. No, they would be survivors. Hoplite would not give up on that hope. Now on to the creatures he had killed upon landing. What are fiends? Hoplite asked. The Heartmother's eyes fell from him then, and she spoke in an almost mournful tone. Poor souls, are they? Taken by the death spiral curse. Forced to inflict pain they are, though it be not their choice. Are they animated by any kind of nanotech? Hoplite asked immediately after she finished speaking. It was a silly question considering who Hoplite spoke to, but he had to ask. The Heartmother's eyes shot up to Hoplite before then shifting to the other members of the Hark Hall, who stared at him as if he were some kind of alien creature. Well, he supposed in a strange way he was. Lance quirked a brow at him then, but didn't say anything. Clearly Lance had wanted to ask just what nanotech was, but she must have realized that the Heartmother would ask that very question shortly. No, the curse is what drives them. What is this? Nanotech? The Heartmother asked, confirming Hoplite's thought. Microscopic machines, he told her. The Heartmother stared with a furrowed brow. So, they are tiny constructs? Affirmative. Hoplite told her with a nod. Nanomachines are thousands of tiny machines working in tandem to achieve a particular function. What mage can bind so many constructs at once? The size of the construct doesn't matter. Every individual animated object takes great effort to bind. The most powerful of mages can bind 3 at most. The Heartmother asked him, leaning forward in her rooted seat. Hoplite then noticed Turlin glaring at him, those red eyes accentuated by popping veins. When he noticed the glare, Hoplite turned his helmet in that direction, meeting that crimson gaze. After a few seconds, Turlin looked away to glare at Lance instead. She didn't seem to notice the glare at all, her eyes still glued to the Heartmother. Turlin may turn hostile later. Hoplite would be keeping an eye on the red-eyed elf. There's no magic involved, Hoplite replied sternly, cocking his helmet back to glance up at the Heartmother. Just advanced AI. The Heartmother had opened her mouth, likely readying to ask just what an AI was, when suddenly, literally, out of nowhere, based on what he read on his motion tracker, another Watcher appeared. Out of thin air he came, his clothing the mirror image of Lance's, with a couple jaw-shaped tears in his outfit. From the looks of it, those bites had barely missed flesh while pulling away the cloth. The elf then fell to his knees and rasped, "The fiend wall has fallen. Fiends are pouring through unopposed." Everything fell silent, and a cold stillness came over the chamber. Hoplite himself was staring wide-eyed at the sudden appearance of the Watcher. There had been no indication that this man was approaching on the motion tracker. Hoplite hadn't seen him coming with his cameras either. The man had simply popped into existence from nowhere. No, not nowhere. The crystal had teleported him based on what the Heartmother had said. Teleported him not solely based on proximity, but sheerly by intent from what Hoplite had learned. Was that true? How did the crystal tell the intent of the person wanting to be brought here? He had no answer. Lancella, recite the Watcher's silence for our earlier meeting, the Heartmother commanded in a voice that brooked no argument. Lance then dropped to her knees and said loudly, My lips are sealed by the golden flame of foundation. Nothing from this chamber I have heard will be uttered to anyone save for those currently present, until I am given permission by the Hark Mother. The Hark Mother nodded and sighed. I do hope Gali has roused his defenders in time. Do you know if those who live in the wall have perished? The new elf shook his head as Lance stood no. I only have heard that fiends are pouring en masse through our forest. I have heard a portion of the wall had just collapsed. They are heading for the bastion as we speak. I ran as fast as I could when I got word, and was beset upon by lesser fiends. Then we must mobilize. The Hark Mother declared, turning her gaze upon the other elves in the hall. Every off-duty watcher must take up arms and purge the Thawwood of this menace by any means necessary. The Bramble Guard must be rallied, and patrols will be doubled. Spread the word, she ordered in a steely tone that Captain Stoll would have applauded. The Hark Mother then looked to Hoplite. Her eyes intent, Hoplite. You are a warrior, yes. Affirmative. He told her honestly. Then I must ask you to aid in destroying the fiends. They pose a danger to my people, and the Hark Mother began. Affirmative. Hoplite repeated, cutting her off. The Hark Mother stared wide-eyed, whether in shock at being interrupted, or at Hoplite's willingness to fight with no hesitation, he did not know. It was simply his role as a Hoplite. He must defend humanity in all its forms from those that would cause harm to it. There was no question to what his answer would have been. At least it was so to Hoplite. These elves truly had no idea what a Hoplite was. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked. I thank you, the Hark Mother said slowly. I must be honest. I had sought to pressure you into this, had you refused. The Hark Mother admitted with a sigh upon your landing you, no doubt, had destroyed several of our trees, she continued, Hoplite nodding in confirmation of her accusation. She blinked in surprise. I thank you for not trying to be deceitful. Honesty goes a long way with most members of this hall, so we thank you. If they did decide to try and punish him, though, Hoplite would have no choice but to defend himself. He could not allow himself to fall victim to whatever backward laws the elves followed. Normally, this would require a dire punishment, but given your unique nature as an outworlder, it is no surprise that you would be completely ignorant of our laws. Even outsiders who had never set foot in the Thawwood, at the very least, know not to harm our trees. However, you were uniquely innocent in your demolition. You simply could not have known. The Hark Mother continued, sparing a glare for Turlin, as the blonde elf's face turned a much deeper shade of crimson. There will still be a vote to decide for a certainty. The role of Hark Mother is not that of a queen, but I am sure that most other members will find the logic in my words. She told him, I just hope the Fae that inhabited those trees fled when they had the chance. Destroying our forest is grounds for harsh punishment, but killing a Fae of the wood is a death sentence. She emphasized, holding up a single finger. A tree cannot regrow if its Fae is slain. They are the very life of our woods. She continued, lowering her finger. Now that your ignorance of their importance has been quashed, you will have no excuses should it happen again. Hoplite said nothing in response. They could have their vote if they wished, but it meant nothing to him. By every single metric, Hoplite was above their laws, and as such would not subject himself to their judgment. There was no such thing as Fae or spirits. A tree was just a tree. The Hark Mother then cleared her throat. Turning to Lance, "Watch Hoplite," she commanded. Lance nodded without hesitation, but said nothing, turning to stare at Hoplite. Watch him? Likely they didn't want Hoplite moving about their territory unsupervised. He would not argue the point. Hoplite just hoped that Lance could keep up with him. "I will put you under the command of Knight, Captain Muro." The Hark Mother said he is a brilliant tactician and negative. Hoplite cut her off. "He will not understand how to utilize my capabilities. I will operate to my full capacity without orders from someone who doesn't understand just what I am." The Hark Mother seemed to glare at Hoplite a moment before speaking. "You will not cut me off again, Hoplite. You will show proper respect to the Hark Hall, Outworlder or no." She told him in a cold voice like steel. "Besides, you do not know our woods. Muro can guide you to where you'll need to be." Lance flinched at hearing that tone, and she peered up at Hoplite, as if to see if he were injured. It would be against protocol to allow an officer outside of the Eighth Arm to order Hoplite. If he defied protocol, he would have to be re-indoctrinated. Hoplite could not allow that to happen again. The Hark Mother did make a good point, though. Hoplite didn't know these woods as well as the locals would have. But then again, if Lance was going to watch him, "Lance can guide me through the forest. He said I can't get lost with her being with me." It was true based on how he had seen her move through the woods, as if through her own house. These words produced a strange reaction from the Hark Hall, and especially Lance, who stared at him with her jaw agape. She snapped it shut, and then looked to the floor, tangling a hand in her long black hair, and hiding her face with the other. The Hark Mother seemed to be amused by this based on how she quirked a brow at Lance. Hoplite didn't understand why those words would provoke such a reaction from them. But at the moment, it didn't really matter. The Hark Mother opened her mouth to speak again, but Hoplite overrode her. "Every second we spend talking," Hoplite began, the ache in his throat giving his voice a more gravelly tone, "more fiends come through the fiend wall. Teleport me out and I will take care of them the best way I can." The Hark Mother lifted her chin to stare down her nose at Hoplite. "Very well. I will not argue when you speak sense. Go. But when we speak here again, you will give the proper courtesy and respect due to this hall. I thank you for your aid. But again, now that," she continued, narrowing her eyes at Hoplite, "you will not destroy any more of our trees." And just as they had entered the Hark Hall, they had left. He and Lance both were teleported back outside, to the massive field of outspread roots in an instant. The Ilum tree loomed tall in the night sky, covering half of the full green moon overhead. "Well," Lance said with a sigh, "since that's taken care of, I suppose we're going to be working together to drive off the fiends." Now the Hark Mother said not to destroy any of the trees. Just so you know, what she means by that is utter destruction. A few scrapes and nicks here and there won't be a problem for a Fae to recover from, and the tree spirits usually know when it's time to flee. "Avoiding hurting the forest is preferable," she continued with a sigh, "but considering your preference for thunder staves, I think it'll be impossible." She paused, scratching her cheek anyway. "I have to watch you, meaning I'm partly responsible for any damage you might cause. For both our sakes," she said, gesturing to herself and to Hoplite, "try to mitigate the damage you might cause to our trees." Now, she said slowly before drawing two long daggers out from a pair of leather sheaths tied to her waist. The metal gleamed in the moonlight, and she gave the twin blades a smile. Each as long as her forearm, these should do for me. I would ask to borrow one of those thunder staves you have, but frankly, those things scare me, so I'll stick with what I know. Well, Lance told him with a wink, sheathing the blades and pointing off toward the horizon. The fiends are likely to be more concentrated in the woods east of the bastion, considering that the fiend wall is that way. Shall we go? She asked him. Affirmative. Hoplite replied.